So I'm going to be talking about analyzing the local food system in drylands to understand the specific issues and opportunities in this context for addressing wasting. So here we have a conceptual framework, as was presented by Patricia, on a conceptual framework of the food system. And we're particularly interested in drylands food environments. And this food environment is shaped by the food supply and the consumer behaviors. And we really want to assess the characteristics of dryland food environments. And for that, we've been measuring availability and affordability of nutritious foods in this context. And this has helped us to understand the level of constraint that individuals and households can have when making food choices, and that will affect diets and health and nutrition outcomes. So an overview of the main characteristics of food systems in drylands. First, we see that households are very heavily dependent on markets. These are areas where food production is reduced, and rural markets offer significantly less variety of foods. So in a non-dryland area, we probably see above 80 different types of foods, but these are contexts where we see from 50 to 70 food items across all food groups, and with specifically lower supply of nutritious foods. The cost of a nutritious diet can be 3 to 4 times the cost of meeting energy requirements only. In the non-dryland context, that would probably be a nutritious diet would be twice the cost of an energy-only diet. So here as well, when nutritious foods are so expensive, then we look at the proportion of households that can afford a diet that meets all nutrient requirements, a nutritious diet. And we see that in this context is where we find the highest non-affordability of nutritious diet. It's above 70%. The majority of households cannot afford a nutritious diet. In some areas, it was not even possible to meet the nutrient requirements of an entire household from the locally available foods. That was seen particularly in some pastoralist markets in Somalia. So in these, where a nutritious diet is not affordable to most, here is where we have the nutritionally vulnerable children, women, adolescent girls that face even greater challenges to meet their needs. We also find a lack of local economic operators, food price fluctuations, and systems that monitor food prices focused on staple, which limits the visibility of nutritious food prices and their changes. So all these analyses that I've just presented are extracted from field and nutrient gap analysis that we've conducted in Africa. And here you can see in different drylands covering Horn of Africa, Sahel, Southern Africa. So I'll dive into a country example to better see how these informations can shape a response. So here is Burkina Faso. And when assessing the food environment in Burkina Faso, we see there's a very contrasted, non-affordability of a nutritious diet varies when we are in production zones or when we are in the north of the country, which are the food deficit zones. And in the furthest north region, we even see, which is the driest region of the country, where there is persistently high acute malnutrition, we also see that's 80% of the population that cannot afford a nutritious diet, so a large majority of the population. and that's constraining households and individuals' dietary diversity. If we try to unpack a little bit the drivers, we can see that there's an important food price variation from the southern regions of Burkina Faso to these northern drier regions. And if we look at some grain foods like maize and beans, the food price variation is between 15 and 20%. But if we look at fresh perishable foods like fruit, vegetables, and some meat foods, we also see a much higher variation. So this really points to important opportunities in either increasing local production of fresh foods or improving the supply of these foods. And all this information, all this analysis, in a context like Burkina Faso, have been used through a process of looking at these barriers to nutrient intake, identify what can be the context-specific opportunities, and it's very important that these processes take place in every country, and engage stakeholders from different sectors, not only health, but agriculture, education, private sector, in decision-making to improve affordability of nutritious diets. And my last point will be that from our work in drylands, we're seeing that the gap to affordability and access to nutritious diets is so high that we need a layering of actions that are complementary, that help households improve nutrient intake. And these actions are around increasing availability of nutritious foods, increasing households' purchasing power. We also see that because of the food environment, food consumption is very much centered on staple foods. So there are important opportunities to increase the nutrient content of these foods. And lastly, ensure targeted interventions for vulnerable individuals, which are a high risk, very high risk in this context. Many thanks.